Yep, okay. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Alain+Zidouema, and I'm with the SourceFire VRT. My team and I, we work on providing intelligence and protection for our customers. So what we do day in and day out is vulnerability research, and I in particular focus on anti-malware research. We have different products. Most of them are open source. I don't know if you've heard of Snort, ClamAV. We're the guys behind that. And we also support Razorback, which is our latest undertaking. And we also recently acquired Immunet, which is a cloud-based antivirus program that mostly run on Windows, and we're working on providing a Linux version as well. We have about 20 members. Most of us are located in Columbia, Maryland, which is right outside Washington, D.C. But we have a few teammates in Seattle, Washington, in Germany, Italy, and Poland. So today I'm going to talk about rogue anti-malware. And for those of you who don't know what rogue anti-malware is, it's pretty much software that misleads users into paying for non-existent security services. I want to stress that it's rogue and not rouge. So I know that sometimes people are really quick-fingered and type rouge instead of rogue, but that's one of my pet peeves. So I just want to make sure that it's spelled rogue and not rouge. Rogue anti-malware heavily relies on social engineering in order to get on the user system. So that's the way they usually bypass all the security mechanisms that have been in place in recent operating systems. Most of them target the Windows platform, and you usually get infected with a rogue anti-malware product through a browser plugin, an email attachment, or plain old, social engineering, like going on a website and finding out that you need to download a codec in order to watch a video. Most of us are really quick into clicking on yes, please download that codec, not really knowing where it's coming from. There's also rogue anti-malware that will get on your machine through exploits. And I think that the next talk after mine is about CVEs and vulnerabilities, so you will have a better idea of how vulnerabilities are exploited in the wild. But you can get infected through drive-by downloads, and I'm sure that you've heard about all the vulnerabilities in the PDF file format, and a lot of times the PDF format is exploited in order to infect you with rogue anti-malware. And finally, and this is a common characteristic about rogue anti-malware, is that it relies heavily on scareware in order to get users to install it and ultimately pay for the services or the non-existing services. So for this study, I looked at data going back to April 2010. Virtually all the samples that I was dealing with were Windows PE files. Ultimately, I was looking at a list of about 9,000 URLs, and they were pointing to about 2,000 distinct IP addresses. And all of that information is available on our website on labs.snort.org/IP list, and you can get all the cleanup IP, DNS, and URL information if you want to see what I was using. So what I found is that about 60% of rogue anti-malware top-level domain end with .com. And I think it makes sense when you think of it, because the bad guys want to make sure that their URLs look legit. So if you were to see a domain with a .cc or .ws website, top-level domain, you might be a little suspicious about that. But since most websites out there end at .com, they also try to register .com domains in order to, lower our suspicious level. It is also worth noting that only 0.6% of URLs were ending in .ru, and we've known that in the recent years there's been a lot of malware that's been coming out of Russia and China in particular. And 7% of rogue anti-malware websites have domains that end with the .cn extension. Now, when it comes to the domains themselves, about 20% of the data of the URLs that I was looking at had the word scan in them. And if you've played with rogue anti-malware before, you'll find out that a lot of them are usually named something like Win Antivirus Scan 2011 or something like that. So these are the most typical keywords that you will see, and any combination of those will typically give you what a rogue anti-malware domain will look like, and most of the time with a .com extension. In contrast, when you look at trusted antivirus programs, and I looked at about 60 different antivirus vendors, you don't see the occurrence of the word scan or 2011 or stuff like that. Because when you think of it, and I'm not trying to name any vendors here, but think of maybe Symantec or McAfee. You know, the domain isn't antivirus McAfee 2011. It's just plain old McAfee or Symantec or sourcefire.com. So, like I said earlier, we had about 9,000 different URLs mapping to about 2,000 distinct IP addresses. So that gives us about 4 anti-malware domains per IP address, which is unusually high. Typically, a vendor will have an IP address or a set of IP addresses in case they want to do load balancing or things like that associated with a particular domain. You don't typically find 4 domains that are pointing to one particular IP address. I also found that these websites are hosted all over the world. There isn't one particular geographic location where these servers are located. It really spans the entire globe. So at first, when I was putting together this presentation, I focused on rogue anti-malware on Windows. And it turns out that in the past month, actually in May, there was an outbreak of rogue AV on the Mac platform. And I suppose that some people thought for the longest time that Macs were more secure than Windows, but it's really not true. It's just the fact that more people focus on Windows because there is a larger user base. The more Macs we'll see out there in the wild, the more vulnerabilities will be discovered for the Macs, and the more likely it will be that bad guys will try to target Mac users because that's where the money is. So the first full-blown campaign to target OS X was done mainly through search engine optimization, but it was also done through social engineering. There were lots of emails that were going out there, and they had a typical email attachment, and users were just too quick to trust the sender to download the file and to execute it. So I looked at one of these rogue anti-malware products. It's called MacProtector, and this is what the installation screen looks like once you run it. And by the way, to run it, you have to put in your administrator password. So you can see how it easily bypasses the security mechanisms in place. You will notice that it is only requiring 2.9 megabytes to install, which is unusually small for a legit security program. And once you go through the installation, this is what you're going to be looking at. This is the scan page. So as soon as you click on scan, you will see that there is a whole bunch of windows that pop up, and they tell you that you're infected, and your computer is going to die, and it's the end of the world and everything. So, well, you continue with the scan, and at the end, it tells you that you have 4 infections on your machine. Well, this is, kind of strange, an infection that is just called adware. That's not typically how we do it in the security community. We'll give a name that's a little bit more descriptive, maybe adware dot, Mac OS X dot something, but not just adware. And on top of that, I was doing this on a fresh install of OS X, so I was 100% sure that I didn't have any malware on my machine. On top of that, I went and I looked at those files over here to make sure that they were clean, and indeed they were clean. No problem with those. So I looked at the network traffic, and as soon as I started running MacProtector, it connected to the internet. And this is a screenshot of Wireshark, by the way, which is a network traffic capture tool. And you can see that there is a GET request that is done, and it's going to, can't really see the IP address from here, 95.64.55.5, and the URL looks like i.php and question mark v equals, and a whole bunch of data and many different parameters. So for those of you who are familiar with Snort, this is an easy way of detecting that the malware, that you're infected with malware, because you have weird-looking traffic going out, and on top of that you have a user agent string that says MacProtector. Well, typically when you're using a browser, you'll have a user agent string that will say, Mozilla Firefox or Microsoft Internet Explorer. Your user agent string doesn't say MacProtector. So if you want to write a Snort rule, Snort being, I would say, maybe the de facto IDS/IPS product out there, you could write a rule that would look like this. So you would alert if you saw a packet that goes across a network that is leaving your network going to an HTTP port after a session has been established, meaning the three-way handshake. And you will look for a GET request in the HTTP method. You will look for the word MacProtector in the header, and if your packet meets all those conditions, then you can alert on the packet. But you can also write a rule that would detect MacProtector based on the URI itself. Let's say that instead of using the user agent string MacProtector, it was just using a typical user agent string. Well, in that case, you could base your content on the URL itself. And as you can see here, I'm using a PCRE because when we're looking at the data over here, I wasn't too sure what the information was, yet I knew that I was looking at maybe a certain number of consecutive numbers, and followed by an ampersand, meaning that you have another parameter that is passed to the server. So this is how I would write the Snort rule to detect it based on the URI. So I went back to MacProtector and I continued playing with it. After it tells you that you're infected, you can choose to register for the product. And this is what the registration screen looks like before you register. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but it is full of mistakes. If English is your first language, or if you're really good at it, you can immediately figure out that there is some weird stuff going on. But in any case, say that you click on register because you feel that you're infected, and MacProtector is here to save the world. So you click on register and you can look at the network traffic, and it looks very similar to what we saw before. The only difference here is actually it's not using MacProtector as the user agent string. It's using Mozilla 5.0. So all of a sudden, the rule that we had before to detect MacProtector based on the user agent string is not going to work anymore. However, you can see that the URI is quite similar to what we had before, And instead of having /i.php, the only difference here is that you have that mac.php. So a slight modification to the snort rule would have us detect this, packet this way, using a content of mac 2e, which is hex for a dot, and then a PCRE. So you click on purchase, and this is what comes up. It's a screen that is letting you choose which option you want to purchase. Well, our product was called MacProtector, and you can see that there is an icon for a product called Mac Defender. So you're like, this is not really, something that should be happening. But let's say we go ahead and we, choose one of these options and you purchase a license key. Well, sorry, let me get to the next screen and come back. Well, you enter the serial number, which is what I did, with a fake credit card, obviously. And you register, and it tells you that you're registered. Now it gives you contact information, which is also unusual because typically trusted vendors will let you contact them, even if you don't register. But in this case, you have to register in order to be able to contact the people behind MacProtector. You see that they have an email with at mac-defense.com, and defense here is spelled with a C. In the U.S., it's spelled with an S, so it's also something that kind of raises your suspicion level. And the phone number is 1-800-959-4031. Well, in the U.S., it's typically a number dash 3 numbers dash 3 numbers dash 4 numbers. So you're thinking, well, maybe they're not from the U.S. They're not a company that's based in the U.S. that is trying to get me to call them, but they may be someone who's not too familiar maybe with the way things are done in the U.S. and they're trying to get my money. Well, let's follow the money trail. What happens typically is that a user will enter a credit card information in a browser, and well, in this case, Rogue anti-malware, and that information is sent to a payment processor. The payment processor then relays that information to a bank. The bank will debit the user's credit card account and then send the money to the ringleaders, because these are the folks who are behind the anti-malware campaign. And then the ringleaders will in turn distribute the funds to the people who referred them, the customers. So it is pretty much an economy that goes on where some people make money and they give a cut to the people who brought business back to them. So like I said, the email address here is at mac-defense.com, and I looked at the registrant details for macdefense.com, and you can see that the domain was registered with an email address that's fc@mail-i.com, and that information is related to ChronoPay. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ChronoPay. It's a really large Russian payment processor, and back in 2010 they had a security breach that allowed hackers to get a whole bunch of documents related to how they operate in the background. And we know, based on those documents, that the email address fc@mail-i.com belongs to ChronoPay's controller. In this particular case, a controller is also called a financial controller, so that, I guess, explains why it's fc@mail-i.com. This is also a document that was obtained through that breach in 2010, and you can see that the guys at ChronoPay are really the ones doing this anti-malware campaign. They're the ones who are registering these domains. I can't really see on my screen because it's really small, but I hope you can see up there what are the different domains that have been registered. Some of them have already been used, some of them haven't been used, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were to be used in the future. Obviously, ChronoPay denies this vehemently. They say that they aren't behind this campaign, and they issued a statement on their website as late as May 2011. But I don't believe this a second. I really think that these are the guys behind these rogue anti-malware campaigns. So on the purchase screen, we could see that there were different options that you could buy. So there is an option for $59 for a year license. You can get a 2-year license for $69, or a lifetime license for $79. And based on information that is available through ChronoPay, we could see that about 61% of people buy the 1-year license, because you know what, $59 for a 1-year AV license is, pretty hefty. It's usually not what typical vendors will charge. It's a little bit cheaper than that. So you wonder, how much money do these guys make? Because they go through a lot of effort to create these software. They look very legit, and they put it out there. They register domains and everything. Well, the turnaround is typically about 2%. And if you think that a 2% conversion rate is pretty small, pretty low, well, they make, lots of money, millions of dollars, based on the installations that they can get in about a 3 to 6 month period. It just turns out that there's a lot of people out there with Macs. There's a lot of people who will click on anything they see. And so the more money the bad guys make, the more likely it is for them to keep on carrying on these type of campaigns. So this is a sale log from MacProtector. I was able to get this from one of their command and control server. And in this particular case, I'm showing you the log from a user who, I suppose either speaks French or is based in France. So, I blacked out the information, obviously, for that user's privacy. But, I'm sure you recognize the @free.fr mail provider. And you see the type of stuff that the command and control server will get once a transaction is completed. Turns out that even though MacProtector is in English and obviously targets countries where English is the first language, about 1.6% of the people who bought MacProtector are based in France. But the majority is based in the US, Australia, the UK, etc. If you break it down by email, you will see that 27% of the people who bought a MacProtector license registered with a @Yahoo email address. So I'm not saying that people with a @Yahoo email address aren't as smart as people with, @.fr, email addresses. I'm just saying that if you have a @Yahoo email address, you're more likely to fall for a rogue anti-malware campaign. And so after the bad guys make all that money, because you actually gave your credit card info, they take your credit card info and they sell it on the black market to make even more money. So this is how much your information is worth. You can see that a Visa card information is worth about $3. Well, it's not a lot of money, but think that they have tens of thousands of records that they keep on selling to different folks. So it's a good source of revenue. So they get you the first time when you actually pay for the software, and they get you a second time by selling your information. The next thing I noticed was the fact that I had looked at a rogue anti-malware product on Windows called WinWebSec. And WinWebSec's payment page is what you see here on the right-hand side. And you can see how awfully similar it is to the one for MacProtector, sorry. And looking at the network traffic for WinWebSec and MacProtector, you can see that it's pretty much identical for the fact that the parameters are just in different orders. So I think it's fair to assume that MacProtector, MacShield, and MacGuard, which is something we saw on the Chrono, what was it called again? ChronoPay webpage, are linked to WinWebSec as well. And MacDefender, just like MacProtector and the other ones, is usually distributed as a stub.mpkg installer, and that installer drops a file called avrunner.app in the applications directory and executes that. So I took the avrunner.app file and I disassembled it. So I did it with IDA Pro, which is one of my favorite disassemblers, and as soon as you disassemble it, you can see that there isn't much around the main function. Yet, based on experience, I knew that it was a Objective-C, COCO application, which is what most applications are written in OS X as well as in iOS. So we see here that the main function calls NS application main, but there isn't anything there. You go there, and the next thing you see is a jump to a different location. So we need a better location to do analysis. So I looked at application that finished launching, which is a typical entry point for COCO apps, but there isn't anything there either. As you can see, there was just a function preamble and then a return. So I went through the code, and I saw that there was a function called download when control start downloading URL. So the one thing to notice here is that you have a URL over here, and there are some parameters that need to be plugged in. And for those of you who are familiar with assembly, the parameters are put on the stack before the function is called. So I went back up the code to try to figure out what was going on. We see here that there is a config parameter function that is called, and the output of calling a API function is usually put in the EAX register. So if that's done over here and there is another config parameter function that's called right before it, well, the output is going to be put in EAX as well. So I kept on going all the way up to the first config parameter function. So I didn't know the function, so I needed to find out exactly what it did. So I double-clicked on that, and I got the flowchart for the function. So I was like, there's no way I'm going through that in order to figure out what is going on. But I dug a little bit deeper, and I looked at the beginning of that function, the config parameter function, and I could see that it takes an argument, it does stuff, and then at some point it compares that argument with the value 3, and based on what you pass the function, if it's below or equal to 3, it's going to jump to an address location. So I went back to the code to try to figure out what I was going to pass to the function config parameter. And if you look at this and you write it down into the code, what it is really doing is checking to see if argument 8 is equal to 0. And if that's the case, it sets EAX, the register EAX to 2. And if it's not equal to 0, it sets EAX to 1. And then it calls the getConfig parameter function, passing it EAX as an argument. And that is equal to the host name that is then plugged in here. So went back to the getConfig parameter, and we know that either 1 or 2 is passed. So 1 or 2 is always less or equal to 3. So we are always going to jump to location 2AB, was it? 2AB1. So we go to location 2AB1, and we can see that there is a file called downloadpic.png that is likely going to be accessed. So that file is located in the resource directory that comes with the app file. And we know that it's going to be open because there is a fopen function that's called over here, and the fopen is done with read binary permissions. And at the end of all this, there is a jump to location 2B36. So I go to location 2B36, and at location 2B36, you can see that one of the first function calls is fseek. And if you look at how fseek works, it takes a file stream as the first parameter. The second parameter is an offset, and the third one is an origin. Here you can see that the second parameter the origin is a 2, which is the last parameter passed. Let me try to get that. All right, right here. So that means the end of the file. The second parameter, the offset, right here, which is ff, that's equal to -1 if you treat it as a signed 32-bit integer. And finally, the first argument is put on the stack, and it's a pointer to the file that we were looking at before, the download picked.png. So what this means, because there is more going on here, and I'm not going to show you the details, but what happens is that what the program is doing is that it's going to the end of the file called download.pick.png. It is going back 2B bytes, pretty much to this location over here. It's grabbing 2B bytes, and it is XORing that with the value 5A in hex. So what it is doing, in other words, is taking all this data right here and decrypting it. So I wrote a little C code to do that. And the output of passing it this binary string over here is this: MacGuard, and then So MacGuard, 2 IP addresses, and then a number. And if you go back, if you bear with me, I'll show you the format string that we had earlier, which is right here. As you can see, it takes one parameter over here and then a second parameter over there. So that, if you plug that into that URL, you get this URL and that second URL. And they turn out to be the primary and the backup URL to download macdefender.app. So that's how avrunner.app downloads macdefender.app on your machine and executes it. So to recap, this was actually a pretty straightforward analysis. If you've done some malware reverse engineering, you will find that very often the file is packed, it's encrypted, there's obfuscation. They're doing all sorts of stuff to make sure that analysts have a really hard time understanding what's going on. There are also some checks to make sure that the piece of malware doesn't run in a virtual machine. And in this case, I ran everything in a virtual machine. I was able to understand what was going on, but I'm only suspecting that things will get much tougher in the future for OS X reverse engineering. Finally, and this may be a little bit controversial, I think that there is some benefits to rogue anti-malware. So I did say that if you're infected with rogue anti-malware, they're going to tell you that your computer is about to explode, they're going to steal your credit card info, they're going to sell it on the black market. But once you buy rogue anti-malware software, you have some kind of peace of mind if you're an end user. If you're an enterprise user, it's totally different. But as an end user, you have this feeling that you've actually done something right for your computer, and there are lots of studies that show that peace of mind is actually worth something. So I'm not saying that your data is safe or anything, absolutely not, but you have peace of mind, and peace of mind has some value. So, I do believe that some people sometimes take some risks when they know that the output could be a total disaster. And an example is, LA and San Francisco. Lots of people live there, millions of people, and we all know that it's a earthquake-prone area, and we're all waiting for, unfortunately, the big one to happen in the California area. Yet people still live there, people move there, people really don't want to move out. So that's about it, I think. You can find us on IRC. The entire VRT is on IRC pretty much all the time, and we have a blog, vrt-blog.snort.org, and you can follow us on Twitter as well. Any questions? Yes.
Did you see that the software really accesses malware on the computer?
Say that again, please.
Does the software protect your computer?
Well, actually, besides only taking your credit card information, that was the only thing that I was able to notice. There wasn't any other action that was performed, but it is quite often that rogue anti-malware also comes with extra stuff. So you could have a Trojan downloader that will download a password stealing Trojan on your machine, but also rogue anti-malware. So unfortunately, when you see infection on your machine, it's more likely than not that you have more than one infection. But in this case, I just analyzed the standalone rogue anti-malware. Yes?
I didn't get how you got the information about the people compromised and people who actually issue their credit card numbers.
Had access to a command and control server with all the logs and everything.
How do you do that? Is that from the reversing of the application?
No, it's actually knowing where the IP addresses were for the servers and actually probing to try to log in and finally getting in with a password cracker.
Okay, so you practically hacked it.
Yep. So. Hey. I speak French, by the way, if you want to ask me questions in French. So. All right. Any other question?
Did you liaise with police or whatever?
No police interaction or anything. We, we play hard and we try to figure things out on our own. So,
It's rogue and anti-rogue malware.
Pretty much. Double rogue. No. All right. Thank you.